Thank you so much, Ankit, for that very lovely welcome. And thank you all so much for having me today. Now, I'm going to explore a fairly hot topic, and I did talk about it in a similar way for International Women's Day last week. But the difference is that today there are men in the room, which is very exciting for me, because otherwise it's much like preaching to the choir. And as I was speaking with my friend here on this table, enough is enough. Women know the issues, and actually it's really important to invite men to the table to have these conversations about women and what it is that what the issues are that are facing women in general, but particularly in work. So given my qualifications, I guess it would be very easy to fill the room with credible statistics and anecdotes, and I can certainly do that. However, anyone that knows me, and particularly given that I have this privilege of speaking with you today, I'd like to delve a little more personally behind the scenes and behind the accomplishments and share with you a more personal journey marked by its fair share of obstacles and issues that could have been prevented if we'd addressed the systemic gender inequalities that still exist today. So, bear with me. At 16, I found myself cornered in a cool room by the head chef. This happened regularly. At 17, I was forced into uncomfortable physical contact with my employer, more than once. At 18, I was followed into a cash-out room late at night, pushed up against the night safe and felt up by my senior management. More than one of us experienced this, and we experienced this pretty much on every Friday night, every Saturday night when we cashed out. I left hospitality thinking there's meant to be something more professional out there. Surely this isn't normal behaviour. So I delved into corporate world. By 26, I was working as a chief operating officer for an IT company. And it's a very male-dominated industry, and it certainly was when I was 26. And I recall an incident where I had to go into Sydney. I was based in Sydney, but before I moved there, I had to go and recruit a new salesman. And it was a man, and a 6-foot white man, about 30 years old. And he came with me to every sales meeting to learn the process of selling systems that would cost between $100,000 and $500,000. So every single time I'd walk into a meeting, the body language of the person that I was meeting with and that we were meeting with would be directed to him. And it wasn't until it became very apparent to the client that he had no idea what he was talking about, and actually I was the one that was in charge and doing the training. Very slowly the body language shifted to me. But every single meeting I needed to prove that I was worthy of speaking to. It was a default that he would be the one with the knowledge, with the expertise, and with the skills. At 28, I was dealing with the sudden loss of my mum. And I was told I mustn't care about my career because I couldn't come back to work immediately and I wouldn't agree to be medicated 2 weeks after her passing. At 29, I was the carer for my grandmother, who had 2 grown adult sons in their 40s. But for 11 years, I wore the burden, and I did so happily, of caring for her and being torn as I would race back to work as she begged me to stay longer. At 34, after a struggle to have my first child, I suffered postnatal depression, which led to my marriage breakdown, ultimately my own mental and emotional breakdown. And again, not because I wasn't good enough, or I didn't love my baby, or my husband, or my life, but because staying home, isolated, alone, without that identity given to us as women in the workplace, I lost that sense of validation. And I didn't seek help because culturally, I should be happy. I had a very healthy baby after 4 years of trying. I felt very ashamed, and so I kept it inside and let my life fall apart around me. At 43, when I finally found the courage to leave a toxic relationship that was somewhat abusive, I still received judgment about how I had been too work-focused, too driven, and I let my relationship fail. I wasn't at home cooking the dinner every night, which actually I was, but the assumption was that because I worked, I wasn't giving it enough and it was my fault that it failed. Somehow I was still to blame, despite the fact that my partner was an abusive man who also could cook. Again at 46, now I'm ageing myself, I went trick-or-treating with a group of school mums on a Friday afternoon at 5 p.m. And each one of those mums confessed to me the lie they had to tell so that they could leave half an hour early. These were dedicated senior women who worked hard at both their family and their career. And this pressure that they felt between staying at work or telling the truth and what implications that might have, and leaving so that their children could join the class and go trick-or-treating at 5 o'clock astounded me. They felt inadequate and that this was their failing, that they couldn't get away and just do what needed to be done. Now you might think, surely we know better by now. Surely these things don't happen today. How could someone who's educated, who's knowledgeable, who's experienced, allow these things to happen? And yet today, 2024, I am still faced with the overt, pretend mentorship meeting requests with ulterior motives, and less obviously, having to constantly request that meetings at work be scheduled between 9 and 2, simply so I can go and pick up my children. These are just a handful of examples, and yet they still happen to women every single day in the workforce. How often do we as women wear the blame? I should have spoken up sooner. I shouldn't have worn that. Maybe I was being flirtatious. Maybe I didn't look capable enough. Not that, how can we look capable enough, right? Maybe I didn't speak up loud enough. Maybe I shouldn't have gone into the cash-out room to do my job. It's not always loud. Often, these inequalities are woven so subtly into our fabric of our society that they go without saying. And like we discussed at Table 1 here, we celebrate International Women's Day instead of calling out the stuff that still exists today, the stuff that we're still facing every single day that we turn up to work or have to make a choice. This consistent fight for basic validation of safety, of recognition and respect, this is where we need to invest in society. The International Women's Day theme was Count Her In, Invest in Women. But what does that mean? Do women really need more investment, or is it society as a whole that need investment? And I guess it's both. Well, why do we invest in anything is the question. We invest for growth and we invest for a return. So then how do we invest in women for the greatest return? And let's explore this now in relation to women in the workplace. And I'd like to do this by unpacking two contributing issues. The first issue is culture. Societally, we've made strides championing equality for women. We've said women can have the same career as men, be equal. But we've overlooked a very crucial element. What happens to the traditional home role as we progress? How do we expect women to navigate societal expectations of both career and home? Today, women comprise almost half the workforce. They are more highly educated than ever before, and women fill more roles, middle management roles than men. Women are, however, still responsible for over 70% of household duties and childcare duties. The expectation of women with high socioeconomic status to be breadwinners, homemakers and mothers is the Australian contemporary norm. In a masculine culture where we value independence, career and industry, little room is left for community, for caring, for family, if we're really honest with ourselves. The role of caregiving alone, without work, without extracurricular activities, fails to meet the acceptable standards of social approval, if we're honest. Having it all is what constitutes success, it would seem, which is quite the predicament. The second issue is this notion of choice. You often hear people say, but that's her choice. It's her choice to have children. It's her choice to prioritise family over career advancement. It's her choice to come back to work part-time. It's her choice to stay home with her young kids. And I mean, I know that science is developing, but most of the time it still takes two to tango, I'm pretty sure. So choice, in my opinion, is a very lazy scapegoat in a conversation about equity at work. Just last week, my youngest daughter, 6, she crawled into bed with me, and as she crawled into bed with me in the middle of the night, and as she woke up in the morning, she just opened her eyes, and the first words out of her mouth were, "Mum, you come first in my heart." And it was a really heart-melting moment for anyone, but for me it was really special, and it was a reminder why today this concept of choice strikes a very uneasy chord with me. I do choose to be present for my daughter. I prioritise her needs and our time together over my work. Some may question this, suggesting it implies I don't care about my career or the aspirations I have to lead, and I challenge this notion, and as Anne Kit well pointed out, I'm very busy with my work. And why should my embracing one role diminish my capability in another? And the truth is it doesn't. It might diminish the time I can allocate, but it certainly doesn't diminish my achievements and my capability. The expectation that women must constantly justify our personal choices or our couple's choices, especially regarding motherhood and careers, is exhausting to me and to many women I work with. We speak of equality, we celebrate women's achievements annually, but the day-to-day realities often tell a very different story. The invisible labour of motherhood remains undervalued, underpaid, and unimportant. The mental load is a heavy one. So when talk of choice comes up, I'm often left wondering, who else is going to do it? Who else is going to call the school? Who else takes them to their appointments? Who else is going to go back and get the shoes from school because you arrived that morning and everything was going swimmingly, and then as they're entering the classroom, their shoe breaks? True story. Who else is going to pick them up, drop them off? Who else is going to teach them manners? Who else is going to help them do their homework, to listen to what they need, to talk them through a little school crush that's gone badly? Who else is going to be available to them emotionally, intellectually, and physically? In essence, who else is going to raise them? At one of the events I was at this week, for International Women's Day, one of the CEOs sat very proudly on the panel and said, "Oh, no, we don't measure the time that the woman's in the office. It's output-based. It's output-based." Is there no output value in being a mum and caring and doing the looking after of our family and our community? And moreover, when is she making up the time to deliver the work-based outputs? The answer is often when the kids are asleep, after she's put the dishes away and she sits down at 9 p.m. to start finishing the tasks that have been assigned to her to complete, output-focused, of course. And that's not equality. Getting emails from women at 4 a.m, that's not equality. Women shouldn't apologise for choosing to have a child and for wanting to be an active presence in their life. It's not a failing to want to do that. It doesn't detract from leadership ability or professional aspirations. We all deserve to thrive at home and in the workplace without having to sacrifice one for the other. Our cultural norms and our biases are what are limiting, not our abilities. Women need to stop feeling guilty about this current state of affairs. I personally make no secret that I choose my daughter. I make no apologies for it, and it doesn't mean I don't deserve to have an excellent career with potential, growth, opportunities, and success. It does mean that I and many women face an immense burden in continuing to forge this path. When I repeat the words in my mind, "Mum, you come first in my heart," I'm reminded that though I love my work and I would absolutely not give up my work. This is a workforce that would replace me instantly with anyone else, and yet I'm irreplaceable to her. I'm irreplaceable to the grandmother that I cared for 11 years. So what may appear as a choice is often a reflection of limited options and systemic inequality. And until we level the playing field and create a more equitable society where women can equally pursue careers and family life without sacrificing one for the other or working herself to the bone in the middle of the night, true choice remains elusive for many women. And this doesn't just apply to women who decide to start families or take up caregiving responsibilities, but to those young women who may choose to do so in the future. It applies to women who continue to be caregivers in our society, who we encourage to emulate traditionally male roles and careers in STEM, inadvertently undervaluing professions in the arts, in the caring sectors, and in the role of motherhood itself. So, that's a lot, but what's the solution? I'm very solution-focused. Firstly, let's look at it from an organisational perspective. Your website says that Rotary are people of action, and I know many of you, and I know that to be true. I know that the incredible work you do in the community, and this room is filled with leaders and givers and change makers. So let's talk about how Rotary can be an organisation filled with leaders who want to take this action and realise equality not just in the community, but in each of your workplaces. Number one is invest in each woman, regardless of age, life stage, and ambition. Like any investment, gender equality is as individual as each of our financial strategies. Property, for example, makes a sound financial investment. But when, where, how big, how many rooms? Investing in women requires the same approach. What's best for her right now? How can we get her to thrive? What is the best way to get a return? Ask these questions because there is no one size fits all. Number two, invest in flexibility for the long term. Many companies can and do stick to the road well travelled of promoting men, using performance reviews as a strictly work-oriented process, and many adhere to the standard codes of practice and the output model, regulating work hours, days, activities. But here's the thing. Research shows very clearly that force and control don't work. Research shows more that organisations with flexible, people-first values and practices are more productive. They make more money. Staff are more loyal. As I was going through my divorce after I had postnatal depression, I started working part-time at Parliament House as a research assistant. And there would be days in those early weeks where my boss, a mature-aged, European, very old-school Italian man, would walk in the office, open the door, say, "How are you, Tiff?" and I'd dissolve into a puddle of tears. And rather than replace me, which would have been a half-an-hour job, because I was 2 days casual, there was a list of people waiting for that job. Rather than replace me, he spent time listening. He'd order his short black. He'd reluctantly and so embarrassingly order my decaf soy latte with honey. And he'd let me cry in the courtyard. He wouldn't say much and he didn't need to. The investment in me was the time and the allowance to go through what I was going through and to not pretend that everything was okay while I was typing up his notes. That investment in me not only inspired me to want to give him 110%, but also my loyalty for as long as he wanted to employ me. By allowing and creating the right environment, there may be these short-term hiccups in a life, and that's what we all experience, men or women. But like many investments, the gain isn't in the short term. If we wait for it, if we nurture it, the gain will come. We're playing a long game here with people's lives and careers. As it turned out, I stayed until he retired 4 years later, and we're still friends today, 15 years on. Number 3, invest in listening. Invest in the whole person. Invest time in planning. how and invest time in how we can plan for leaders to learn to trust and let go and know that when we give, we get back. Sounds like a lot of work. Can we afford to do it? I can share with you that the cost of new mothers' mental health alone to the Australian industry is over $800 million a year. We can't afford not to do it. We need to make the changes on the ground and let it ripple upwards. Start with having the conversations today. Make her place of work one in which she is invested in, one in which she counts as something, as someone. Now let's talk about what we can do as individuals. Where we have real choice is how we respond to these issues. We can't rely on organisations or government, it would seem, to make the changes necessary in our culture. And men who are increasingly trying to do the right thing by taking parental leave and working flexibly to raise the kids too can't expect companies and government to fully accommodate their needs either. Our response is where our power lies. It's up to individuals, both women and men, to assertively advocate for the changes needed to create a more equitable and supportive environment. How do we do that? We say what we need. We show up and we explain the situation we're in, and we take the risk that we're going to be heard. There's a principle that I introduce with many women that I work with called the minimum principle. And this is about identifying your non-negotiables in each of the roles that you hold. By pinpointing your non-negotiables, we gain clarity on what really matters to us in each of the roles that we fulfill. And this not only enhances our overall sense of purpose and satisfaction, but reduces feelings of guilt and of shame and uncertainty by aligning our actions with our values, knowing that we're not asking for more than what we really need. And I'm talking about the bare minimum. You may think you need more time at home when actually you just need to complete 2 home-related activities to feel balanced. Using this key principle is paramount to finding that individual balance in a meaningful way. Balance isn't a blanket cure-all. It's something that each of us need to find in our own way. And the thing is, there's no right or wrong. What's right for you won't be right for someone else. It's a very individualised process, and it takes an investment in time and in each woman. But all women can get clearer and, more importantly, louder about what it is they need. The call to action here is to together, organisation and individual, create the right environment for thriving. And as members of Rotary, you're no strangers to giving, to listening, and to taking the steps needed for meaningful change. I hear stories every single day about how powerless women feel when it comes to changing the narrative, getting off that mouse wheel of being constantly torn between work and home and caring. And I feel that with every cell of my body. I live it every day. And there is a lot of work ahead, but I wholeheartedly believe and teach that the solution is in our hands and in our mindset. By practicing individual leadership and consciously adapting our behaviours, our biases, our choices and our expectations, by being open and genuine with ourselves and with our organisations, we are not only expressions of our cultural norms, but creators of new ones. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you, Tiffany, as always. We have time for a couple of questions. Is there anyone who would like to ask questions? Tiffany? Anyone at all?
Thank you, Tiffany. That was wonderful.
Thanks.
Ask you, there are some organisations, some agencies, etc., out there who are actually doing this stuff really well in terms of flexibility, not only for women but for men as well, which of course flows on into the home life as well. Have you got some examples of people that or organisations that are doing it well?
I mean, I can only speak from personal knowledge. My work at the University of Adelaide, they're doing it very well. My boss is, he's incredible. He lives one way, and yet with his team, he's a very different person. He will always come in and check on how I am, not on how my outputs are, not on what my work model is, not on anything like that, but he always says, Tiff, how are you? How are the girls? Is there anything I can do to help you? And, you know, it's very simple. It's flexible in that I'm here. I just spent 3 hours with a group of women that's outside of my role at the university doing this work. I leave very clearly and loudly when I need to go for my children. I work from home when I need to work from home. My next boss down is very much the same. They're very open to conversation. My performance review was very personal. It was very much about how I am and what I need to be able to be doing better, and very little of it was focused on work. It was very much about the whole person and how I was bringing that in. So that's just one example, and it's a very simple one, but it's really all it takes. It's about being in tune with each of the people in your team and treating them as individual as each of their situations are. Yeah, thanks.
Any more questions?
Thanks for the presentation. A comment which I'd be happy to hear your reflection on is that I think the problem's systemic. The solutions are very personal, and you've given an example just now of somebody and of people within organisations that you've worked with that have shown that level of leadership, and that's the problem. It relies upon the individual rather than systemic. There's also an economic challenge around this as well too, and if I look at the lowest paid employees who are on structured work agreements, if you look at those work agreements, they're so very defined and talk about the hours you work, the things that you do and the things that you don't do, but talk about nothing outside of that, which are so important to our economic livelihood. And you just look at the depopulation of countries globally now and the challenges they have in many other countries, and Australia is probably there one of them.
Yep.
How do we change the systemic aspects, particularly at the lowest level? You have flexibility because you've got leadership and people who can create that flexibility. Many of those at the lowest level of employment do not.
Yeah. Thank you. What a great question. And there's two ways I want to answer that, and I hope I don't forget one as I'm talking about the other. The first one is you mentioned that it's a systemic problem, which I wholeheartedly agree with, but that I'm talking about individual change. I am very much of the belief that systemic change happens from each individual. Not only are we products of our culture and our beliefs and the norms that we are born into, but we have the same amount of power to change that by changing our individual beliefs and conscious thought. But it takes being open to accept that it's wrong or that it needs to be changed. And so I'm a big believer in be the change, right, that you want to see. And that's very cliched, but it comes back to the essence of if each of us leads in a way that demonstrates to someone else what's possible, it does flow on. I also believe strongly that there is a big problem with lower socioeconomic groups and that the change is not going to start there. The change is going to start with people that can and do have the means to be loud, right? I have that privilege to be loud and to speak and to say to my boss, this is when I need to come in and this is when I need to leave. And I have that. So use that privilege and speak for those that can't leave the factory from 8 till 12 or whatever it is, or that can't leave the bank teller. It's not always, it's just that some jobs can't be flexible in nature. But what those people might need isn't flexibility. Maybe it's that they need something else that isn't being addressed, and it's about checking in and seeing how can we make it work for you. And I don't know the answers for those people, but I would be pressing leaders of those organisations that do have a voice and do have the flexibility to go in and check. And I met with, as you can hear, I'm quite affiliated with Westpac, part of Westpac, the Scholars branch, and I was lucky enough to meet ex-CEO Brian Hartzner, and he was a wonderful leader. And he was a wonderful leader because with 40,000 employees, he made each person feel seen and heard. He met me when I was a PhD student, a scholarship awardee, big deal to him, you know, and he conversed with me about things that mattered to me in a way that I haven't been listened to before by people that I know and love, right? Like, so he took the time and the interest to be able to spend that quality of getting to know what the issues were. In terms of systemic, yes, I do think it starts with the individual. I do think we need leaders that are in this room and that do have the means and the power to speak for the people that don't and to step up. But for each individual, show what's possible. So when those mum friends of mine that came for trick-or-treating, that lied to be there, I pushed them on it. I said, what if you'd asked for the time? Did you ask for the time? Did you explain why? Did you explain that this is really important to your child and that it's part of who you are and that you have two things to do? You know, and I push them to be vocal and I push them to say what they need. And unfortunately, that's how systemic change happens. It's on the ground. So we need to step in and use our privilege that we all have in this room to move forward, to change the dial, to change the conversation, to not go with the flow, but to actually be willing to stand out.